Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We're joined today by Theron Wilburn, former athletic director at St. Francis High School, Palo Alto High School, and former assistant AD at Cathedral Catholic. Coach, super excited to talk to you. It's been a long time coming. Thanks for joining me tonight.
No, so happy to be here. Looking forward to sharing my story and getting into it.
Yeah, let's do that then. Let's dive all the way back to the beginning. So, what was your journey like? How did we end up in athletics as an adult, right? Obviously, I'm sure you have a playing career. You could talk about that briefly, but like, how did you end up in athletics as a coach? What was the process for landing your first job, subsequent job? Just take us through the journey. Plant the seeds for us.
Got it, got it. Yeah, so grew up playing sports, like you mentioned. Huge thing for me is just the pathway into sports. It was about 10th grade, those NBA, NFL dreams ended, but I already knew I wanted a career in sports and athletics. At the time, my high school had an athletic training pathway program, so I was a part of that. So I told myself when I go to college, I'm going to be an athletic trainer.
What school?
Went to Helix High School in San Diego, California. So went to school there and got it accepted to schools. And one of my requisites is they had kinesiology because again, I wanted to be an athletic trainer. Sit down, end up at San Jose State as a freshman, sit down in kinesiology, intro to kinesiology. And they went over all the different pathways. So it was athletic training, exercise physiology, all the different things. And we talked about the courses you had to take. And in athletic training, there was a lot of science, and I wasn't the best science student, but landed on sport management as a pathway. And what I really enjoyed about it was there were so many different opportunities to get into sports. You can be an agent, you can work in pro sports, high school sports, collegiate sports, start your own business, right? Run your own sporting operation. So I like the flexibility and the versatility that pathway opened up for me. Weird thing, I did 5 years of undergrad, and in the first week of my fourth year of undergrad, I woke up and was like, I want to be a high school athletic director. So I missed my class that day, and I emailed 84 high school athletic directors between the San Diego section and the Central Coast section, right? Asked them three specific questions. I said, one, how do you like your job? Two, what are some ideas about getting my feet wet into the career? And three, is it a sustainable career that you do for a long time? I would say I probably got 50% of the answers back, a lot of them being from athletic directors in the Bay Area where I was going to school at the time. And so part of me being a kinesiology student is you had to do a internship. So I was fortunate enough to land an internship at Bellarmine College Preparatory, an all boys school, and this is in 2013, an all boys school in San Jose with the now presentation athletic director Mike West. So he's a current athletic director in the area, but I got my feet wet into athletics at that school. So I interned with them for a year, and I got to coach as well, coach track and field that year as well. So intern just picked his brain, would go in weekly to see how the operation was run. And it was a really good experience because my background was a public school. For me, all boys, private, Catholic, it was very different than what my high school experience was like. And so being able to come from that background that I had to see a different background was really different. And I think it was good for my learning. So I did that for my fourth year. Fast forward to my fifth year, I started looking into grad school programs for sport management. At the time, I really wanted to go to Cal State Long Beach. Didn't end up getting into school there, got into San Jose State for my master's and got into Xavier Cincinnati. Looked at Xavier the day I got admitted, and it was 10 degrees in a blizzard. It was around now in 2014, and I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing it.
That's a San Diego guy. Not doing that.
Hey, I'm not doing it. Except acceptance in the San Jose State where I'm at. And it was a really good thing. In that summer heading into grad school, I was able to land a graduate assistantship with the San Jose State Athletic Department, working in compliance and student athlete services. And one of the things, because I had known I still wanted to be a high school athletic director, but one of the things that I told myself was that I really wanted to learn how a collegiate athletic department functions. So that way you can get the low hanging fruit and implement that into a high school. Didn't know what high school I would land at, but I thought there were some good practices to be learned. And San Jose State did teach me a lot that I ended up using later on in my career. So did my graduate assistantship, got my sport management master's from San Jose State. And upon graduation, I had two really unique offers. I had an offer to be a part-time assistant athletic director at Palo Alto High School, and I had an offer to be a football academic advisor at the University of Montana. So this is in the April before I'm graduating with my master's. And at the time, how I learned about these roles was I had gone to a conference for the NCAA and they had sent us job opportunities. So was intrigued about the Montana job. But in 2016, when I graduated my master's, I was also interning with the Central Coast section, the CCS office as well. So was in two different roles, really wanted to explore my options before I got all the way into a career. Went with my gut feeling and everything that I intended to do since 2013 and joined at Palo Alto as a part-time assistant athletic director in my first year, right? And jumped in, got my sub credential to be able to substitute so I can support myself financially in the Bay Area at the time. And within the first 6 months, the then athletic director had a call in to go back to the classroom. So she had asked me, she said, "Are you interested in being the AD here?" And I said, "Hell yeah." I was super excited. And at the time, too, Palo Alto was going through opening a nice new $40 million facility, was really transforming its athletic program from a longtime athletic director to the new age. So it was a great opportunity and a great place to learn a lot of things new into the field. Do my first year as an assistant, and in that March, I was named the athletic director at Palo Alto High School. And at that time, I was the youngest athletic director in the state of California, right? I was
You had to be like 24, right?
24 years old. Yeah, I was 24. Was excited though. Really got to work with some really dedicated people. And again, it was different than the school I had most recently served at, which was Bellarmine, because this was now a huge public school with a high academic ranking. And so really the emphasis student athlete was there. As I mentioned, we opened a $40 million facility. So getting to be able to learn the ins and out of facility management was a huge thing I learned there. School politics, being a public school and having a lot of community people who are invested in the athletic department and athletics at Palo Alto, but also making sure that there was the best interest of their kids. So learned a lot, met a lot of really good people at Palo Alto. We started new programs, field hockey, boys volleyball, hired some good people that are still even there now. So can't say anything negative there. Started a student athlete council, and it was really good. It was a really good job for me to be able to come on and really learn tricks of the trade as a first-time athletic director. Transitioning from there, I've just grown to miss San Diego a lot. I was born and raised there, single-parent household. So I've been away from my mom for about 13 years now, or at that point when I left, 11 years, about 11 years, we'll say. So looked at job openings in San Diego, and Cathedral Catholic, which is the best athletic school in San Diego, had an assistant athletic director opening. And the person who I'd be reporting to was an athletic director for 30 years. Knowing myself and knowing that I really didn't have mentorship from an athletic director, I thought it was a really good fit at the time, would allow me to move home, but also work at a really good athletic school that put athletics first, but also learn from somebody who had been serving on various CIF boards for the state of California, was a well-known athletic director in the state of California as well. The only thing I can say about my experience there is COVID interrupted a lot of good momentum. Right. This is 2019 when I take that job and leave Palo Alto. So we start, year gets going, and I loved it. Right. I loved the work-life balance that I had. I love the investment in sports and the alumni, how they really rallied around it. And now here I am transitioning back to a private Catholic school, right? So being able to even share some of my experiences with coaches coming from having went to public school, most recently serving at a public school. I think I had a really good perspective of sports, right? And be able to share some of those perspectives with coaches, and they were really good. And I think of the three stops that I've been at in the high school space, the coaching staff there really were program leaders. They had autonomy to run their programs. We trusted them that they were making the best decisions for the interests of the athletic department and our community, and was really able to learn a lot from our coaches there. And we were always in the top 10 for state school of the year through COVID and all that kind of stuff. And but got that itch again to relocate and get back to the Bay Area. So St. Francis had opened up, and it was one of the schools that at the time it made sense to relocate from San Diego to come back for an opportunity. I didn't know much about St. Francis really, even though it was right down the street from Palo Alto, where I was at previously in the Bay Area. I didn't know too much. Didn't know the athletic director well at all, but knew that they were really good across the board in athletics, had a strong alumni presence. So was able to interview for that job and earn that job back in March of 2022. transitioning back and forth. I always say the last 16 years of my life was been back and forth between San Diego and the Bay Area. But one of the things I think at St. Francis, when I transitioned into that role, is I felt like I had done a lot of the grunt work, served an assistant for somebody, went from the AD that was changing bases before games and raking fields to, okay, as this position is being sold to me, it's a really good opportunity for me to really learn those tricks of the trade from college and be that athletic director in a high school space. As presented, it was a role I didn't see burnout in. I had enough supports there, enough people who were full-time in athletics. I really thought it was a good opportunity for me to get back to the Bay Area, be in another really good sports program. And similar to the school I just come from in Cathedral Catholic, really, again, the sports being a really big piece of the school community, school environment. I was able to do some really good things at St. Francis. I think we transitioned some roles to be more effective. We had student voice. We started new programs in flag football, which was really, I actually got to coach that this past fall, inherited cheer and rugby. It was a really good experience. And mine 10 years in athletics, in high school athletics, is really good and has been really good to me. And I think one of the things that I always talk about is I made my way to different conferences and connected with people all across the country is just the sustainability of the career. I'm 34 years old now. I started when I was 24. And one of the things I always tell people, oh, you want to go to college? Do you want to go JC? Do you want to go to the pros? And one of the things about being a high school athletic director that people do not tell you is that you don't have one certain thing to hang your hat on. So you don't have, okay, I'm athletic director, but I'm in charge of facilities, or I'm athletic director and I'm in charge of academics or compliance or finance operations. It's you're doing 10 different things out of five, right? And so you can't really hang your hat on marketing or whatever that thing is. So for me, on my career journey, it's about, okay, I know I can be a high school educator and I can be a high school athletic director, but what is that one thing that I can say, hey, I'm going to be your AD that does marketing well or compliance well or facility management. So I think that's where a lot of people think that the role is glamorous. It's a great title, but it comes with a lot of hidden things that a lot of people don't share and a lot of people don't get out of their own comfort zone to talk about these things. And it's, for me, I found fulfillment in really going to conferences and talking to people about it. And I'm a lifelong supporter of high school athletics, but we'll see where things land.
That's why we're here to talk about it, coach. Let's go back a little bit.
Yep.
And based on your particular journey where you're sitting in this chair at 24 years old, you hadn't been a head coach anywhere, hadn't necessarily coached other than helping out at the high school level or the college level, and you're now the AD, right? So what did you realize right away that you needed to figure out, number one? Because despite all your training, you're not ready regardless. So what hit you in the face right away at Palo when you ended up having to take over? And then a similar question, right? When you came back to St. Francis, even though you had this experience, it's, whoa, this is different. Talk a little bit about those things that maybe you prepared for, but you really aren't ready till you're sitting there holding the bag.
Yeah. I think at 24, a lot of it was on relationship building and trust. And I was super transparent with our coaches that I have not been a head coach. And I always gave a lot of autonomy to our coaches to run their program how they best saw fit. But where I would interject is on culture, right? I think some of the best things I've been able to be a part of as an athlete is really good culture. I think the high school I went to, the athletic program had good culture. And really just even my experience at Bellarmine, being able to observe some coaches who have been there 25, 30 years, I was able to see the difference in those newer coaches who maybe were in it for their selfish reasons versus people who are really invested. And really early on, I always ask coaches what was their why. And 10 years later, I found myself in two buckets of why people are coaching. And they're coaching either to live out their experiences that they didn't fulfill, or they're really there to fulfill student athletes with a great experience, right? And they're in one of two buckets, right? And they can hop back and forth. But what you find is that you have a lot of people who are really there. They're not there for a paycheck, but they are really there to live out those experiences that they maybe didn't get. And so I had a keen eye for that. So as I talked to coaches, I was able to really decipher who they were and ask them, be transparent and ask them their why. So I was able to build really good, transparent relationships with those coaches at Pali, even though I was young. The tough part was I was young, right? And even my coaching experience, that didn't come up more than like my age, right? A lot of, but sharing experiences. And I think one of the things that I got respect from a lot of longtime coaches at Palo Alto because I was an aggressive learner, right? I was aggressively seeking out people to come learn from, right? We were across the street from Stanford. So I went across the street and I bumped into Bernard Muir, who's the AD at Stanford. And hey, can I get 30 minutes of your time? So was able to meet with him a few times over the course of my tenure there. So I think they respected when I report back, here's what I learned, sharing out those things that I'm learning at different conferences. And I think they realize, okay, you haven't been in my seat, but you're teaching me the things that you're learning, because a lot of athletic directors, they learn, they're not teaching it to the people that they're overseeing, right? So I gained a really good respect from our coaches by the time I left Palo Alto, because I was willing to invest in their programs and help their culture, right? And I know X's and O's of some sports, and I think I'm knowledgeable in some sports, but I was never the AD. Hey, you should have ran 2-3 zone, or hey, I would have put this person in over this person, right? And I think the coaches respected that because it gave them the space of not being a micromanager and not being a person that want to be involved in the day to day. I wanted to know what you had going on, but I didn't want to be at every practice observing, making sure you're doing the right thing. I trusted you were doing that, and that trust was a two-way street.
So on that, you use the word culture, which is a buzzword, but can be full of value or meaningless. So when you mention that, what are the things that jump out to you, and how have you used that keen eye, as you described it, to help maybe plant some seeds that help programs establish culture that goes beyond the buzzwords?
Yeah, I think the challenge to all student athletes and the coaches is that coaches, we don't know when their day is going to be done coaching. But student athletes in high school, that eighth semester, high school is over for you. So a challenge to all of the coaches and the student athletes is leave the program better than you found it. And so if you're attacking every day with the mindset of I'm going to leave today's practice better than I left yesterday's practice, or I'm going to leave my 4 years of playing whatever sport you're playing better than you found it, you're going to be improving that culture. If it's worse off when you leave, then that's a reflection of the culture not going in the way we need it. I also think a culture is a good way to be identified by have somebody outside of your community come and observe. And if they're able to lay a good adjective about your program that's in a positive, that more than likely is your program's culture. And I think one of the things that coaches I think get missing, they throw the word culture around, is that a lot of their decision making discernment comes from what they want their culture to be, not seeking that buy-in and making it student centered. And I think some of the best coaches that I've been at Palo Alto and the coaches I've worked with, they have had buy-in from their student athletes and understanding that culture evolves with your student athletes, right? And the best coaches, their culture evolved as a student athlete has transitioned and changed through different things, whether it be COVID, whether it be social media, NIL, and club sports. The best coaches, they've identified that their culture is going to evolve, but also they're going to make sure that their culture is going to stay true to tenets. Right. So, what are those non negotiables within your culture that you have? And if you ask a coach and they can't answer that, then you don't have a culture. Right. And so, one of the things to come up with a mission statement for your program. So that way, prospective family or prospective parent can know, okay, in your program, here's your mission. And if you're living out your mission every day, your culture is going to be identified in your walk as your coaching and as you're playing and participating as a student athlete.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you just said is important, right? Is what are the values that you hold that are non-negotiables? And that, in essence, becomes the culture. I also like your idea here. Have somebody from the outside observe and describe what they're seeing. And that's probably your culture, right? When you're, let's say, struggling to put words to it. Let me ask follow up to that. Over your career at your stops, what would you say is the best thing you do that has the largest ripple effect on that culture that you're trying to create, that in your next job you're taking with you? I'm doing this regardless because it's transformational in what we're trying to create. What would you offer to somebody else that's in the role that, could adopt and maybe try to implement something that you've found great success with?
Yeah, I think the what I've hung my hat on as an athletic director is a process of transparency, right? And oftentimes that means just FaceTime with your coaches, right? Firm believer in if I find out something about your program that's going to help you and hurt you, I'm going to tell you about it, right? Because I want you hearing it from me first. And if we have that relationship of transparency, then you're going to tell me things that are going to make me better and help support all of our programs. And I'm going to tell you things that are going to make your student athlete experiences better, right? And so for me, in that transparency model, it's meeting with our coaches preseason, it's meeting with our coaches midseason, it's meeting with our coaches postseason, right? And what they appreciate from it is that you are taking the time to meet with them, right? I always the three T's, right? I can give you my time, my talent, or my treasure, right? I'm not going to give you my treasure in this role, but I can give you my time. And I think I can give you a little bit of my talent. And so giving them that time and giving coaches time to be able to say, I'm going to walk with you if you want to create your culture has always worked for me. And one of the things I think the blessing about having worked at different stops and making my different stops and rounds in the state of California is that I have been able to build relationship with really good people. And what you realize is that there's gonna be 5 to 10 people that you're gonna talk to for the rest of your life, right? And those are the people that you build meaningful relationships with. And I was always a proponent of I'd rather have 10 great relationships than 100 good ones. I really want you to know what I'm about and who I'm about. I can serve anybody, right? 1,000 student athletes, I'm going to serve them. But if I can get to know 100 of them really well, and those are the same 100 that circle back in my life and I circle back in their lives, I think that's what it's all about. And I'll tell you a story. My first year at Palo Alto, we had a student. His name's Jared Wilburn. He transitions in. His dad is a coach at Stanford, men's basketball coach at Stanford at the time. He's a junior, right? We find ourselves and just connect with one another. His birthday's a day after mine, right? Our last names are 2 letters apart. He's the closest student athlete that I've met in my 10 years serving, and we became close because we were both new to Palo Alto. And so I was his accountability partner. Go to class on time, get in the weight room, stop doing this, stop doing that. And our full circle moment came. He went to school at Cal Lutheran, or excuse me, Cal Baptist or Cal Lutheran, played D3 basketball. Called me and said, I really want the big experience of playing college basketball. So he ended up at Purdue, and I was able to watch him walk out on senior night at Purdue. Now he's 24. He's my age when I met him, and he is working outside of athletics. But to be able to build those type of relationships that are everlasting is something that I think I strive to build, and I love building those. Right? I've every year that there's been thousands of student athletes I've worked with, but those relationships that I've been able to build and maintain and keep is what keep you in it, right? And that's what I think you bring into my next school is that level of transparency with student athlete and coach and those relationships that'll be a long time coming and going.
What advice would you have for people that are in the same situation you currently are, right? Where they're looking, what's my next step? What am I curious about? And you're exploring different opportunities. And there's a concept that I would say I'm more aware of now as a 50-year-old than I was as a 24-year-old, where are you a mission appropriate fit for place X in regards to you cut your teeth at Bellarmine, went to Palo, went back to Cathedral Catholic, came to St. Francis. You went to high school, to public school, whatever. You've had a myriad experience. That sounds a state. And I don't know, job X shows up down the street and it's, ooh, I need a job. Let's talk a little bit about that idea, right? Are you a mission appropriate fit? Where are some things that maybe are blind spots that you're now more familiar with as you explore your next option?
Yeah. My first job, I was going to say yes, regardless, right? Just the title alone drove me to want to be at Palo Alto. They could have paid me $1 and I probably would have said yes, right? The most intentional move I think I made in my career was to move back down to San Diego. I knew what I wanted. I knew what I wanted from work, right? And I think transitioning to St. Francis, I wanted things necessarily I wanted the wrong things, right? And I'll be honest, right? The title was a little bit of it, money being a little bit of a factor. And what I would say is you have to interview the school or the job or the company or the organization. You're interviewing them or they're interviewing you and you're interviewing them. I think background, just like they're checking your background, you have to check their background. And I think even too, when you get that feeling in your gut through the interview process, it's okay to pull out and say, hey, it's not working. Even being in the role, right? If there's better opportunities that come across your way, you have to be able to jump at those. For me, at the last stop for me, I had opportunities to relocate to San Diego, some schools I think with a better fit for my style. And I said no to, because you get in these roles and you're so loyal, right? You don't want to be the person that is, I don't want to be here only for a year and then I'm leaving and they're tarnishing my name. But you have to protect yourself in a lot of instances, I think, because they're not going to protect you. They're going to do what's best for them at the end of the day. But I think just making sure you're doing your research and talking to people and trusting people for what they tell you. A lot of people, and I've done my homework at stops I've left since Palo Alto at Cathedral, called alumni I knew. Tell me about your experience. What do you think? Same thing at St. Francis. Tell me about your experience and what you think. And so you have to be able to understand that people are being vulnerable and transparent with you about their experiences, both good and bad, and be able to decipher, do I see myself there? And so for me, what's next for me is making sure that wherever I land, it's a good spot for me to be and I can feel it, right? It's a feeling. It's like buying your house, like meeting your spouse. It's a feeling that you get. And if you don't get that feeling, this is your career, so you need that feeling. And I can't say I had that feeling at St. Francis, right? It was a great opportunity, great on the resume. These are things, all things people are telling me, but one of the things you can't take away is that feeling, right? Of this is home, this is where I want to be for a long time.
No doubt. And if we're honest here, right, you had a couple year run and it was fine and it wasn't catastrophic or anything. It's just when at the point I'm at now, and you're mid career, you're not the front end, I'm taking any job. Where for me, it's if it's not a hell yes, it's a no, right? And everybody's at a different age and stage in their career. But even if you think about you relocating to San Diego because of mom, it's the same reason I came back to the peninsula. Okay, my kids were 5 and 3. My mom was here. She was their favorite person on the planet. It's, hey, we got to go be closer to mom. And then your next gig, it's not that it wasn't mission appropriate. I can tell you when I got back to Stevenson, 10-year public school, 2 years all boys, came here. Like I was not a mission appropriate coach when I got here. I had to figure out how to fit into this environment while staying authentic. So even as you go to your next place, there might be that feeling and you're still going to have to evolve into that place, right? Talk a little bit about how you've been able to do that at certain places, even as you're now back at San Jose State doing some things. Like, what does that evolution look like? What are you looking for that you have to respond to that you can advise people who are maybe new at a site, being like, hey, these are the things you're looking for that if you miss them, you're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah. Early in my career, I genuinely was showing up not being who I was. I wouldn't say I was code switching per se, but I definitely was not showing up being Theron Wilburn and my non-negotiables, right? I was
And
in
by
them.
the way, for those of you that don't understand what he just said, that's a whole podcast in itself that we're not going to do today. But Google.
Code switching, yes. So I knew that. And when I transitioned to San Diego, there was more comfortability just being home, right? It's something I can't even speak to. It's just, again, that one of those feelings. And so I felt like I could show up and be myself every day. Again, this is 2019 and 2022. The world was so different back then than it is in 2025, right? We have COVID, we have George Floyd, we have post George Floyd. So me being an African American male on a predominantly white campus, right, I was able to really lean into my blackness and be accepted for who I was. And I thought it was a really good thing, right? I thought the school was really inclusive. At the time, I thought that we had some hurdles to get over and some incidents that happened that needed to be addressed, but I was able to show up and be myself every day. So now transitioning back to the Bay Area, one of the things I told myself is that I'm going to walk in here and be myself every single day, right? If they said they wanted me for me, then I'm going to show up and be myself. But also one of the things I told myself is I wanted to be a holistic educator, right? So I wanted to be in the Black Student Union, right? Help with that group. Because a lot of times, right, like you don't see many African American males in education. And when you do, they are the athletic director. They're the head basketball coach, athletic director, football coach, athletic director, right? So for me, I really was like, I love athletics. I love directing athletics, but also I want to make sure I'm showing up in different spaces and talking about things outside of athletics, right? And so I think as you have to adapt to your environment, but I don't think you should necessarily change who you are to be in that environment. And so for me, one of the things was like, I'm not going to change myself to be in this environment. I was told, not all the time, but I got told, hey, I worry that your lack of relationship building is going to hurt you here. And I said, to be honest, what your references on me have said he's a relationship builder, right? I was like, but again, I'm of the 10 over 100. I'd rather 10 people know all my ins and outs than 100 people just know I went to San Jose State and I studied kinesiology. That's just how I am. But I also am a firm believer that to have professional relationships, not everybody has to get along. You just have to respect each other, right? You have to respect each other's work. You have to respect each other's commitment to these students. And that's all I want to be respected for, right? Or remembered for, right? And wherever I go, whatever I do, is that he showed up, he did his job, and he cared about the people, right? And he was himself. I want people to remember me for being myself. Oh yeah, Theron was this way. And you live and you die by that, but you're able to leave dignified and you're able to be dignified every single day. And that's why I'm fortunate to even be on something like this to talk to you, right? I met you through serving through different organization, right? And really getting out of the just environment that the ADs that you're seeing all the time. It's like, how do you build those type of relationships? Those are the important things that sustain you for a long time. So if you do have a setback, you can lean on a network of people that are looking out for your best interest, because not every time is an institution or an organization. I just say you got to stick true to yourself and walk in dignified and adapt to your environment, but don't change to your environment.
Yeah, and I think you have to have the emotional intelligence or the awareness to have people looking out for your blind spots that are pointing some things out. So, to your point, I'm a relationship builder, but I'm not necessarily the center of attention at the faculty social. And I was looking while you were talking for this post that came up on the socials the other day, and I shared it with my wife and my buddy here at work because I'm like, I want to say I'm antisocial, but I'm like you. I like small groups, one-on-ones, things of that nature. And the large group stuff is hard for me. But the post was basically like that not everybody at work is your friend. Do your job, go home. And but you can have generative, professional, collegial relationships that don't necessarily end up as friendships. And even this, our collegiality and us as an athletic director colleagues and us operating in the same spaces allows us to support one another's, even though we're not like hanging out at Christmas together. And I think that's what sometimes is a struggle is people try to put us in boxes. So let's talk a little bit about how you have been able to, number one, develop professional relationships, and number two, I don't want to say use those in a transactional way, but benefit from those that has allowed you to better serve others.
Yeah, people always use network is a huge buzzword, right? Oh, make sure you're networking, make sure you're networking. Again, showing up and being yourself, people are going to gravitate to good people, right? And you don't even need to be good at your job. You just need to be a good person, right? Make it hard, make it easy to find a good person, right? And so for me, professional development has been the biggest way that I've cultivated a lot of relationships within the field, right? So my first conference as an athletic director was in 2016 as an intern. I didn't know a soul there. I didn't know one person in San Diego. And I was like, geez, like I'm leaving the conference going to hang out with people from my hometown because I don't know anybody. Transition to 2017, I go to the national conference and my buddy Mark Bermudez, he was an AD at Alma Heights Pacific Bay Christian now. And he grabs me, hey man, let's go do this, let's go do that. And I'm like, all right, that's my buddy, it's my guy.
But
And he
Mark's
ended
also king social at those places.
Yes, he was. He transitioned. He's a married man. He's a married man now. He would bring me around really good people. Anthony Thomas, Carlos Reed, Kevin Adams. Before this group called Nomad Now existed, I remember we went to a Top Golf in Phoenix, and it was like, wow, like this is cool. I haven't seen many African American ADs, but also these are people from different states, different parts of the regions, and they're all getting together. I'm like, so there is fellowship that happens in this space, right? And so that was so good to see. And then really going to games and seeking out the other athletic director was really good for me. So when I was working at Palo Alto, I had a really tight knit bond with those ADs that were in that league, right? That's still evident to this day. And we supported one another because we were all going through our different struggles, but a lot of the same themes were popping up. So being able to call and, hey, how you doing this? Or, hey, how you doing that? And then seeing each other so frequently, it just builds that bond. And then we get together at conferences again. We socialize, we fellowship, we do the same thing. And so it becomes cyclical. And again, good people find good people, right? And so I've just been able to find good people. I think it's been a blessing to have worked in two different parts of the state of California, because now I have a contingent of San Diego athletic directors that I'm really good with. I have a contingent of Northern California athletic directors I'm really good with, but also I make it a mission to collaborate with people at the national conference as well. A few years ago, I said I want to meet one AD from a new state every time I go, right? And so I usually try to seek out somebody. Maybe I'm sitting in a session with them. Like, you don't see me much at the national conference because I'm probably with somebody else from another state, learn people from another state. So if God moves us to a different part of the country, I know somebody, right? And so that's just always been my thing, is trying to find good people. I've been blessed enough to really find good people in the role. And I always use this analogy, right? Because sometimes at school things get contentious and you're like, man, in my own house at the school, sometimes I don't get the respect I need or I'm looking for. But I walk into my community or I walk on my street with the athletic directors and it's a good feeling. And so honestly, I care more about what my perception is in the athletic director community than my school site, right? Because those are people who know the long hours I'm working. Those are people who know the parents that are emailing you about their kids and how their kids are getting treated unfairly. And it's a unique bond that's unspoken. You get 3,000, 5,000 ADs in a room. There's some unspoken things where you just look at each other like, I know what you're going through. I know what you're going through, right? Maintaining them has been good too, because I think one of the things I always try to do is look for outside perspective. It's easy to ask the local ADs, hey, what are you doing to solve this situation? One of the things that came up at St. Francis was travel. So I was like, okay, no AD from Atlanta, no AD from Virginia, no AD from Texas. How do you guys handle travel? Is your school supporting student athletes traveling? Like, travel in high school sports is a thing now, right? It's a thing you fundraise, you budget for, you make it a point to do, because families are looking to, especially at schools that are private, like the ones I've worked at for the most part, if your kids aren't playing the highest level tournaments or traveling, even just as a good fellowship opportunity, they're looking at the next school. So this is a trend that's happening, and I'm hearing from it from different ADs. So I'm like, okay, this is the national thing that's doing. If we want to be a nationally ranked program and operate as such, then that's what we need to be doing. And so being able to have those relationships and ask, what is the state of Texas doing? What's the state of Georgia doing? These are states that are really good in high school athletics. Developing those relationships at conferences has allowed me to learn more than just the local membership that I have to ADs with ADs.
And it doesn't just have to happen there, right? It's about the initiative to build relationship, which you talked about, right? So when I went to the conference this year, it's let me catch up with my buddy from Atlanta that I met last year, right? Let me catch up with my buddy from Hawaii that I met 7 years ago that I only get to see at this thing, right? But to your point, so I went last summer to Australia and visited like 12 schools while I was there, talked to them about what they're doing, figured out that going on like international tours is a big thing for them. And our girls water polo team had gone to Croatia last summer. And now our boys team is going to go. And like, we're trying to do something with the basketball teams. And we're trying to figure out, as you mentioned, like travel, but ways in which you can be exposed to things that you don't know about, right? I didn't know that. And me going there opened my eyes up to, wow, this is the norm. Okay, the next step is, how do you do this, right? What are the pieces that need to be in place from those schools that do it all the time, right? Insurance, umbrella, how do you limit liability, right? All of that stuff. So now I can support our teams that want to try to do this, right? We went to Canada to play field hockey this fall for 2 games. And it's so, to your point, how are you meeting up as an AD? You're a one of one most of the time, right? So like, how are you using that professional learning development to ask those questions about what do they do that you're not, that maybe can help your kids? What are some things, right? Knowing that's how you're living in this space, that you look at, and we take the Nomad group, right? That you didn't exist when you first went, obviously is now, and you're part of that. And you mentioned that you want to be part of the BSU at your school, right? How have you taken some things from, let's say, that affinity space and thought about, even if you haven't had a chance to implement them, but while you're back at San Jose State surveying the room, what are some of the things that you think anybody could benefit just that you've learned being in kind of an affinity space that could then maybe help kids?
Yeah, I think high schools have an opportunity to, again, like you mentioned, expose our students to life outside of what they know. We went on this past fall, St. Francis in 2024. Our football team went down to San Diego and actually played our alma mater, right? For some of the kids, they had never been south of Los Angeles or really left the Bay Area without their parents. And so small stuff from even like packing a bag, which a lot of people think, oh, like I do this. They play club sports, so they do it frequently. Some kids and a lot of kids of color, they don't do that frequently. They're not getting on planes or long bus rides or what have you. So what I've seen, and this is even true in the Black Student Union, is that a lot of high schools have the opportunity to expose students to a life outside of what they know, right? And so I think once high schools recognize that, they will be more inclined to do those types of trips with their students, right? And when it comes to student athletes, I used to tell people all the time, I can't tell you many of well, I didn't travel in high school, but we went on a long bus ride, 3-hour bus ride to like almost to the border of Arizona from San Diego.
I was about to say that in your section, it goes forever.
We were on the bus for 3 hours there, 3 hours back. We got there at 107 degrees, right? I remember that. It was 107. I remember the whole town shutting down for the game. It was like some I saw on Friday Night Lights. I don't remember. I know we won, but I don't remember the score of the game. And so being able to, years later, to talk about that experience is so much greater than the winning and losing that goes on, right? So we're talking about sports specifically. We remember the tri-tip that they cooked at the barbecue pits. And that's what we talk about. So we find fellowship in talking about our lived experience and shared experiences together. And again, we took a bus there, but you talk about going to Canada together. If I did that with my best friends now who are my high school teammates, we'd be still talking about that 20 years later. And I think that's what schools have to recognize, is that in this 4-year window, schools can help these students who maybe parents can't afford them to do that, right? They can help them expose them to an environment outside of what they know, right? Because once they go, hopefully they go off to college, right? But college is, you're still in a structure. I'm going to class, I'm doing this and that, and it's a permanent place. But to be able to spend time with people you love, care about, sweat with, and then be able to return back and have those experiences when you see each other 40 years down the road. Hey, remember that time? Who knows what goes on in those hotel rooms, right? We don't know that. But those are the things that you remember and you take with you. So I think it's my job to wake those who maybe are fortunate enough to travel a lot to recognize, like, hey, we have an opportunity to get these kids outside of their normal day-to-day lives. One of the things I was working on before my departure was a proposal to take the Black Student Union of St. Francis to the National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. Right? And I'm like, these kids will never, they may pass by, they may go later in life. We have an opportunity here as a group, as educators, to educate them and show them their history. And so I think that's the important thing. But how do we get high schools to wake up to this is an opportunity outside of the classroom? There's so much more learning that goes on. We say it, but do we really mean it? So I think it's so true. I think there's more learning happening outside of the classroom in conjunction with the classroom that's happening on the outside.
For sure. And I think for those that are listening that are like, these things are these giant grand plans. You're flying across the country, you're doing X, Y, and Z. It can be as simple as taking your kids to college campuses while you're traveling in the summer, especially for underrepresented groups that might not have that access. Our local guy that runs 7-on-7 took a group up to Portland last year to play in a tournament, but also to visit the U of O and some of these things because the population that he was traveling with just didn't get to do those things. And so I think you're spot on in that. I'd be curious to know. Let me backpedal. So we talk about what you can learn in outside of the classroom, right? And sports is one of the greatest teachers because of the reps. You fail, you're right back at it. You don't have time to stop, right? That adversity that you're going to face and what you can learn from that. How would you say leading in that space As you encountered your own adversity lately, how did that serve you and how you're processing and moving on from that and the way in which you're showing up as your best self?
Yeah, it's time to walk the talk, right? For myself, one of the things I always told kids is that you're going to run up against hard things, but do not let it fold you, right? If it folds you, then your next step forward is standing up again, right? One step at a time, right? And so I've just reminded myself in these last few weeks is it's one step at a time, right? Opportunities have opened up fast, right? And it's one of those things that you tell students that you have to trust the process, right? If any student that I have those in-depth conversations with, it trusts the process, right? And you want things to move on your time, but you don't have control of everything, and you have to be able to trust the process and be able to seize opportunity when it's in front of you, right? That's what we tell kids all the time. Trust the process, seize the opportunity that's in front of you. And so for me, it's trusting the process, right? Trusting that things are going to work out in my benefit, in my favor, because they haven't my whole career they have, right? And so I've been able and fortunate and blessed to work at great places. And that's the thing you tell kids, right? Yes, you may have had a hard time right now, step by step, process will get better and you will have an opportunity to seize, but you got to be ready, right? If you're just sitting around moping around because something hard happened, right? That's a habit that you're going to form as a 14 to 18-year-old. So when that hard thing comes in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, what are those habits that you have to be resilient? And I'm blessed, not blessed, but I've been through a lot of things in life. And so for me, bouncing back and being resilient, that's just part of my makeup. So a lot of people, you good, you doing, I'm good, man. Like I've been better, but I'm good. Like I'm walking every day. I'm showing up and I'm being able to serve student athletes still. My process is going and I'm trusting it. And that's what I tell kids. You have to trust the process. We want everything now, but patience, right? Step by step, right? You look up, it's a mountain. You just keep climbing the mountain with your head down. You look up, one day you'll be on top of the mountain. And so if you can trust that process and be ready for when the opportunity is present, you'll flourish, right?
Absolutely. And I think what we teach these kids, adversity strengthens. And so, how are you using that to inspire? How are you using that to look at the lessons learned? Because it's just feedback loops. It's like, hey, this didn't work out. Okay, why not? X, Y, and Z. Cool. Let me go get better at those things. Or, right, you curl up in the ball and like boohoo and blame other people and be a victim. Those are your options. So, I love the fact that you're tackling it that way. Yeah. What would you say you've most recently changed your mind on? And it doesn't even have to be about sports, but I often ask this, especially in the world of polarization that we're currently living in, where people get entrenched in their echo chambers. And it's like, how are you challenging your own beliefs? What's something that, like, hey, I used to be over here and pretty dug in, and now I'm over here, and here's why?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. You take
Yeah,
a
while you're
second.
thinking about it, I stole it from a guy named Dave Stahoviak. He runs a show called Coaching for Leaders, it's called. And he always asks that at the end. And I thought it was fascinating. I was like, I'm stealing that. And it's just always curious, right? It's what have you changed your mind on? Just like in no, for 25 years it was X, now it's Y. And here's why. It was intentional, right? It's a growth mindset situation. It's not just willy-nilly.
Yeah, I think this may sound cynical, right? I've changed my mind on the openness I'll have with people. For a long time, I'd say I was opposite. I was very close to the vest. I think even probably overly calculated, right? And didn't trust people. I think when I like building rapport, I like building those relationships, but you have to be able to operate with transparency, but also keeping your cards close to your chest, man, because I think it could play you in the long run. So for me, it's being able to one, build those trustworthy relationships and not just come in blindly saying, you know what, I'm with you every day. I trust you. I trust you. And so for me now, it's like meeting people where they are, right? Showing up and meeting them where they are, but being more having more discernment in the trusting process. And I think that's healthy. I think it's a healthy thing to do because you recognize like not everybody is in the same space for the same intention, right? You get to understand people's intentionality as well too, right? And then you're able to again to make that discernment of do I trust this person or do I not? But again, it ties back in those professional relationships. Can you not trust somebody and have a professional relationship? Absolutely. But you got to know that this person may deviate from what your expectations are for them, and that's okay. And so I think for me is being able to just have a little bit more discernment with my trust And when I do identify it, pouring all in. Like you my guy, you my girl. I'm rocking with you. Let's get into it. And being just having a little bit of this discernment, having that discernment. And I transition back and forth where I'm at now in a new endeavors. Okay, let me see where people are. And once I can get that inkling of that silver lining of trust that I can believe in you, like we're in this together. Let's go do it. Let's go change the world.
Even in the space you're in now, where I've got my eldest child is graduating from college, her best friend's graduating from college, and she is the daughter of our math department chair, who's a good friend of mine. And it's okay, they're looking for a job. And it's, hey, what's your advice on X? I'm like, tell every adult you run into what you're trying to do with your life. What? Hey, listen, you're still young enough where people give a shit and want to help you. Tell them. You never know who they might know or what's looking, right? And so, similarly, right, you're in a position right now where it's like, all right, as you encounter people in the network, right, it's like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And it's just out there in the universe. And you never know what comes from that, right? Just even calling me 2 days ago and it's, yo, here's what's going on. Bet, let's talk. Let's figure it out. I think that's that trust piece you're talking about, where it might be uncomfortable, but closed doors are blessings, as my good friend told me on this show a while ago. And it can lead you to other doors that maybe you didn't think were open. So I love that that's where you're at right now. Let's wrap with this. As you go into this next phase and you reflect back on all the coaches that have come through your office that you've been able to serve, all of the new hires, the OGs that have been there forever, right? The longtime mentors that you've had. For people that are at the precipice of, God, do I really want to do this? You asked me what I did today, I couldn't tell you, but I was busy from 6:30 a.m. until now, and I got a game going on right now. But it's like, what advice do you have for those people that are just, I don't know if I'm all in on this, or I don't know if this is for me? Like, how do you help them see the forest for the trees and either realize it's not or realize that it is? What advice do you have for them?
You got to stay patient, right? And you got to trust your talent, right? One of the things for me, and I said this early on in my career, is I'm not going to get in the hype of chasing money, right? And at many junctures, I could have, right? I graduated from undergrad, saw my friends who didn't go to grad school start all these tech jobs. New cars are showing up, trips on Instagram are showing up, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm GAing making $1,000 a month. Like, what's this? What am I doing? But I was patient, right? And get the job at Palo Alto. So now we're 3 years post undergrad graduation, people making really good money. And I'm like, I'm working part-time with no benefits. What am I doing? Door opens, right? And just stay patient. And got to a point in the career where I just stayed patient, doors opened, and I seized those opportunities. But it was a process, right? But I would just, my advice is trust your talent, right? Your talent is going to open more doors than your resume, and I think for me, like my talent, me trusting myself, having confidence in myself, knowing that if I get in the right room with the right people, I can get an opportunity. And that's what I tell myself. And so it's being able to be comfortable sharing stories about career, life, whatever that may be, but also I think for those people who are trying to figure it out, right? You may feel stuck because I have the golden handcuffs on. Really good job. I got kids. I have this, right? But and your heart's going to tell you where you want to go and what it should lead you to. For me, my heart always leads me to be the role model you needed when you were younger, right? Be the role model you needed when you were younger. And so when I look for roles, that's what I'm looking for. And when I look for future roles, that's what I'm going to be looking for, a role that will allow me to be the person that I needed when I was in high school or in college, right? And so whatever capacity that is, whether it's sports, nonprofit industry, whatever, I want to be serving people and a role model to people that I knew I needed when I was in that same space. So that leads me to high school kids, college kids, whatever. But for those people trying to figure out what is next, I think you have to be able to trust your talents and trust your heart and listen to it. Again, your stomach telling you something, believe it. Believe it. That's what I would say, because it's you just get into the day to day and you realize, what did I really do? And that's
Well,
where you just, you don't want to be there. You don't want to be like dang, I did a lot of things today, but I can't tell you one thing I did, you
right.
know?
Right. Yeah, no, and I think it's funny because you mentioned when you're a GA making $1,000 a month. When I was a full-time assistant at UC Davis making $6,000 for the year, like when you've worked those jobs, it's a whole lot easier to just figure stuff out than if you haven't been in that situation where you're an adult and you're still eating mac and cheese. So I
Yep.
think ultimately, like your point, stay patient, stick with the process, understand that there's plenty of people that have been through it before you, and you'll be okay on the other side. So I appreciate that optimism and advice, and appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me just share my journey and looking forward to what's next.